Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Celtic Way. This is today's morning briefing for Wednesday, the 2nd of October. My name is Ryan McGinley, at the Ryan McGinley on the X handle. Today I'm joined by Haggerty10, Tony Haggerty, who is live, probably, unfortunately, from Dortmund, and will dissect everything that went on last night. There's more bad things than good things, to be honest with you, with regards to that game. I don't know if there's any good things at all, but it was Celtic 1, Borussia Dortmund 7. As much as the optimism was there before the game, it didn't take too long for that optimism to go out of people's sails, the win to be out of people's sails. There was about 30 seconds or 40 seconds in which there seemed to be a bit of positivity because Daizen Maeda scored an equaliser from a great cross from Greg Taylor, but that was short-lived. Karim Adeyemi scored a hat-trick, Seydou Guirassy scored 2, Emre Can scored a penalty, and I think at the end it was Felix Nemechia that scored the 7th goal. So it was a really heavy defeat, another heavy defeat for Brendan Rodgers for Celtic in Europe. Tony, what's your thoughts? I know we didn't get a reaction podcast last night for 2 reasons. One, because I think the result was still too fresh, and 2, because it was about 1 o'clock in the morning by the time we could have went online. So Tony, I'm not going to say your immediate thoughts, but what's your thoughts having slept on it and really sort of allowed it to breathe a bit?
So much for that optimism, eh? I think Kevin was the kind of naysayer, wasn't he? Or certainly.
So much so that my camera's stopped.
Yeah, your screen's frozen. Kevin was prescient in the fact that he said temper the enthusiasm, but yeah, it was just, it's not pleasant watching that, is it? It really isn't. It's not the first time that's happened to Celtic in European football, in the Champions League especially. I think that's the 3rd time 7 have been put past a team managed by Brendan Rodgers.
2 wee seconds. I'm just going to come out and back in, so just keep on talking and I'll get back in a wee second, all right?
Yep. Hopefully Ryan will be back in. But guys, like yourselves, it's not pleasant viewing, is it? And, you know, there's all sorts of excuses. They were a formidable team, as Brendan Rodgers said in his pre-match press conference, and they punished every mistake that Celtic made. But Celtic made a lot of mistakes, and 5 minutes in, you're conceding needless penalties by losing the ball, get back in it brilliantly, and then within 2 minutes you're chasing the game again. So we never gave ourselves any kind of chance, Ryan, to get a foothold in that game. We got a foothold in it for like 2 minutes, but it always seems to be the mantra afterwards that they'll learn from the mistakes. But Celtic just, if you've watched Celtic in Europe over the last 20 years, they're not learning anything from the mistakes, are they? Still continue to make the same mistakes. And this was a team that Brendan Rodgers thought was capable of handling, certainly handling the atmosphere and handling the occasion. Too many players froze on the night. They don't become bad players, but Dortmund were clinical. I mean, that front three, the pace was electric. It was frightening. But even still, you've got to give yourself a better chance of getting a foothold in the game. And again, 2 penalties given away, Ryan. 5-1 down at half-time. You're never going to win football matches when these things happen.
No, I completely agree with everything that you've said. The pace in that front three, especially from Karim Adeyemi, who tore Celtic apart last night, but Jamie Gittins as well looks a good young English talent, another player coming through that conveyor belt of Dortmund, of being a young English talent. You look at Sancho, you look at Bellingham, now you look at Gittins. I'm sure they've got a couple of other players there working in the background as well, so there's a conveyor belt for them. Guirassy cost... I couldn't believe last night when the commentator said that he only cost Borussia Dortmund 18 million with 28 goals, Bundesliga goals last season. That's the level that you've got to aspire to be at. And I just think in the second half, it would have been, it would have just been academic, really. It would have just been another goal for Celtic. But you look at that chance for Ademida that he headers right at the goalkeeper with no pace whatsoever. That's a chance that Guirassy would have absolutely bitten your hand off or teared your hand off for. In the second half, he would have scored. That's the difference. That's the level that Celtic need to aspire to be. Brendan Rodgers was speaking after the game. He was pretty honest about what had happened. He said he'd never been involved in a game in which all of the mistakes that Celtic made resulted in goals. It's very rare that you see that in a game, that you get punished every single time you lose the ball, but that seemed to be the case last night. I think they were the masters of the architects of their own downfall last night with some of the stuff that they were doing.
Yeah.
You look at the Maeda giving the ball away for Karim Adeyemi's third goal on the night. You look at Alistair Johnson for Guirassi's goal. He gives the ball completely to the opposition and gives his team a lot of pressure. Every goal that I watched, out of maybe one or two towards the end, and I said that, and I got a bit of stick on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. Every goal was preventable. They were all goals that happened because Celtic gave the ball away. And I know good teams force that out of you, but you've got to stay resolute in your defensive duties and in your passing duties as well. And Celtic didn't do that. They were the architects of their own downfall last night. As much as Borussia Dortmund were good, Celtic really were. They really did make it difficult for themselves with the mistakes that they made.
Yeah, I mean, Borussia Dortmund showed they're on a different level completely. But for Celtic to have any foothold in that game, they've got to do the basics right, Ryan. And they never did the basics right from the moment they stepped on the park. They got it right once and scored the goal, Dyson Maeda. But also as well, see when it goes to 3-1, and I know it goes against every grain and fibre of your being, but surely you have to go 4-5-1 when it goes to 3-1, and you just say, okay, the game's lost, it's gone. Because of the way Dortmund were playing, they just looked dangerous every time. And Kasper Schmeichel, who didn't have a great night, still kept the score down with a string of decent enough stops.
He kept it from being double figures, Tony. Basically, that's what we have to say. Kasper Schmeichel did keep it from being 10 or 11.
But when it goes to 3-1, you're thinking to yourself, this is a long night. Yeah, and I know Brendan Rodgers saying he won't change, but something has to change, Ryan. I have to go back to the drawing board a wee bit on that one and just accept, okay, 3-1, fine, let's try and just damage limitation after that, because they were just swarming all over Celtic. And, at one point, Brand was strolling about. I mean, I think you and I,
last night. Freedom
of Dortmund to, pick passes, do things and just drive at a non-existent midfield and non-existent defence. I think, 3-1, you kind of realise the game was gone. You have to change it, surely. You have to do something to stem that tide. And I know it's not Celtic's way of playing, but, you hadn't given yourself a chance or an opportunity to win the match when it went to 3-1. And going in at 5-1 down, it becomes damage limitation in the second half then, but it should have been damage limitation at 3-1. You just change your formation and say, right, that's it. No more concession of goals, and just go defensive. There is nothing else you can do, and when a team like that is just picking you off at will, it's horrible to watch Celtic getting mullered so badly like that, but they were clinical, they were brilliant.
Yeah, and it doesn't get any easier for Celtic in the Champions League either. They face an away trip to Bergamo, the Europa League champions, and Atalanta, who are fearsome at home. They really are a different animal at home under Gasperini. It's going to be a difficult tie. Charles Coker, thank you very much for the donation, the $5 donation. Really appreciate that. He says he's genuinely gutted for Scales. The dude was fighting for his life with Trusty and Taylor on either side of him. He stepped up with some good challenges. He's probably the best out of a bad bunch, to be honest, in the defence. Trusty had an absolute nightmare against Guirassy. He wasn't the only one that had a nightmare. I thought Johnson as well was pretty dreadful against the play. He did have a couple of good tackles in the second half, but then he goes and undoes that with an inexplicable pass out to the Borussia Dortmund attackers, and that leads to Guirassy's second goal. And you don't need to give him a second invitation to shoot or to run at goal. I mean, that goal, the second goal from him, as much as I don't want to talk about the opposition, it's just brilliant attacking play, because he totally turns Scales inside out, puts him on the other side, and then passes it into Kasper Schmeichel's near post. That's the difference at this level, and I think better players than Scales will find that out from Guirassy. He looks like a top operator, as did Julian Brandt. You get 40 caps for Germany. You can't be a bad player if you've got 40 caps. We've got players struggling for one cap in some places. So You know, that's just the difference. Adeyemi's got caps for Germany. As much as I, as much as I watched him in the Champions League final make the wrong decision, he made all the right decisions last night, and that's the difference. And that's the level you've got to aspire to at this level.
Celtic are playing in a league within this new revamped Champions League phase. There's kind of top 8 teams, isn't there? There's a middle tier of teams in Celtic, and then there's a third tier in that, the 24. Celtic are in that third tier, trying to grab one of those top 24 spots, and we get it that it's difficult, but when you can't go there and hold onto the ball, then you're asking for trouble. And everybody was optimistic the way they were playing domestically, that that this was finally a time. Arne Engels last night, the only one thing you can say is, no, he's going to get better, but what a age to be handed a Champions League lesson. And he's our best player, he's our most expensive player, Ryan, at 11 million. And, posted missing. He was posted missing last night. You can't say anything other than that.
I think that's an area that we've got to discuss, to be honest, Tony. The midfield has got to be discussed. And as much as we've been talking about how impressive they've been domestically and against Slovan Bratislava as well, they were a key cog in the winning machine against Slovan Bratislava. But all 3 of them, they were posted missing. Even Hatate had good points and bad points to his game when he came on, but at least he was offering something different. He did give away the ball a couple of times. You expect that from Hatate, but he was making things happen or trying to make things happen. I get that the game was done, but Engels really, really disappointing last night. And I think his penalty that he gave away just summed up the whole game. I see a couple of people in the comments saying it's not a penalty. Celtic get the same thing in the first game against Bratislava. Say what you want about a player going down too easily. It's contact. He gets kicked and he goes down. Every player is going to go down, especially in Europe. They're going to take that. They're going to take the collision. They're going to take the touch and go down. And it's a stonewall penalty. They don't even need to look at that, to be honest. It's in today's day and age, regardless if you like it or not, it's a penalty. But it just summed up Engels' game. But he wasn't the only one. McGregor had his poorest game in a long, long time. Paulo Bernardo was utterly anonymous, and it does beg the question, and it does bring back up the question: do Celtic need a proper number 6 for these games to keep the defence safe? Because the midfield was like a sieve yesterday. They allowed everything to just pass through them.
Call it pragmatism, call it what you want, but you can't go toe-to-toe with these teams. You realise that. Brendan Rodgers should realise that by now. He tried something and he needed all of his players to bring their A game. They didn't bring any kind of game to the party, Ryan, and that's the problem. And you did feel that Celtic could lose this game, but you didn't think that this team were capable of losing by 7-1. I think that's the biggest shock in it all. Just didn't think that was going to happen to Celtic teams anymore. But, it can be done. Neil Lennon went to Lazio and 1-2-1. Gordon Strachan got some results in Europe by, just tempering that aggression and, attacking nature that's in Celtic's DNA. The times come, Brian, because Celtic cannot continue to get results like this away from home in Europe. And, and they're racking up under the manager, those kind of results. So something tells you that something has to give. That's what 7 against Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona, and
6 against Atletico.
And 6 against Atletico, yeah. So that tells you something. And I don't know why. And to me, at 3-1, the system should have changed. Celtic didn't seem to appear to change the system, did they? Don't think Rodgers made any tweaks or anything to it. When it goes 3-1 and they're rampant like that, you feel the game's done and dusted. You take a 3-1, don't you? If you can get away with a 3-1. But they just seem to be doing the same things and making the same mistakes over and over again. And you keep hearing the same mantra. We'll learn. As I said in the lead up to this, I wanted to know what the players had learned. from previous campaigns and what they've learned from playing as well as they have done this season in the first game against Slovan Bratislava. But I tell you what, we now know Celtic aren't as good as you think they are, and what the players are learning in the Champions League is that you'll get punished ruthlessly for not doing your job and not turning up. And I don't know if they let the occasion get to them, but something got to them because they were just spooked immediately when it went to 2-1 and then 3-1 and just couldn't recover from that.
Yeah, completely. It's one of these sobering results, and Cal McGregor did call it sobering as well in his post-match with TNT, and I think it's the perfect sort of adjective or way to describe that game. It was just very, very sobering. It was every chance that Borussia Dortmund got, they seemed to take. Adeyemi was causing so many problems. Emre Can was causing problems. After the first couple of minutes, I didn't even think he was going to play. And 5 minutes later, he was stepping up to take a penalty to make it 1-0. It was just that kind of night. Where'd the Celtic go from here, Tony? Because it's been such a phenomenal start to the season domestically, and that first game against Slovan Bratislava. It's important that Celtic, isn't it important for Celtic that they don't allow this game to start a skid? Now, I don't think it will. I think they'll go to Ross County still feeling confident about themselves, about how they can play, and they'll see it as a chance to maybe take out their anger on a team like Ross County. But it's important for them to bounce back quickly, isn't it?
You need to pick themselves up. They're going to Atalanta in a couple of weeks. They're going to Bergamo to play in Italy, and and the nature of football is the next game's round the corner. It's Ross County and Dingwall, but the manager said it himself, it's up to him to pick them up. It's up to him now to work on a strategy to get a result in Italy. But there's 6 games to go in this Champions League campaign. They're not out of it by any stretch. And they won convincingly at home against Slovan Bratislava. So, you have to just... It is that old... Brendan likes his boxing analogies, but Celtic need to take this on the chin. And it's a haymaker they've taken, an absolute haymaker, because again, you just didn't think that they were capable of being destroyed like that or losing like that, but they've been in the same movie a few times under Brendan now, and it is baffling to hear them say that they'll need to learn from it, because there's just no evidence of learning, is there?
No, absolutely not, and I completely agree with you. It's the second time in a few months. It's been a sobering experience for the likes of Cal McGregor, etc. in Dortmund. They faced Germany in the opening day of the champion of the Euros at Dortmund, and that wasn't Dortmund actually. That was Munich. That was in Munich Stadium. Just in general, in Germany, they've had bad experiences over the past few months, and it's something that needs to be rectified, especially against the German side in about a month's time against RB Leipzig, who a lot of people say are a better side than Borussia Dortmund, on paper at least. They're similar sort of places in the Bundesliga, but really, really strong team. Just last night, do you think there needed to be more? We might be going over old ground here, but do you think there needed to be more of a pragmatic approach? Were you surprised that there was? There wasn't more pragmatism from Brendan Rodgers, because it's a result that, if I'm being honest, you could see happening to Ange Postecoglou's side. But I just thought with Brendan Rodgers' pragmatism, the fact that he's been there before, he knows what these teams can come up. Even last season, against Atletico Madrid, albeit they conceded 6 with 10 men. This was conceding 7 with 11 men on the park, although it didn't feel like having 11 men on the park. Felt like Borussia Dortmund had 12 or 13 players on the park at some points of the game. Were you surprised at the lack of pragmatism from Brendan Rodgers? Was it tactical naivety? I'm not sure. What would you put it down to?
I think that's the problem. All these phrases come out, don't they? He's tactically naive in Europe. He's, pragmatism and all of that. But you mentioned Scotland, Germany, and the Euros. I think Steve Clarke was pragmatic to the point.
That is very true, Tony. That's a good point.
He played defensive football and they still got hammered. You know what I mean? The people say they lacked ambition to get up the park. They couldn't get up the park. So you have to just try. And I get that, they're one of the elite level clubs in Europe and they're beating Champions League finalists. But it doesn't help when you go there in confidence. Domestically, you're on a high. You've had a great result in match day 1, and all the pragmatism in the world wouldn't have helped you from making basic errors last night. But the manager called them formidable. They were formidable, but he also said that he believes when Celtic do things right, they're a hard team to beat. They didn't do anything right last night. But they got it right once in the 9th minute when they equalised. And no sooner had they equalised, fans were still celebrating when Dortmund went 2-1 up. And, it's just, again, we spoke about it yesterday, and I spoke about this losing of clusters of goals. It always seems to happen to Celtic. Don't just lose one, they lose clusters. 3s and 4s. It finished 7-1 last night, but 5-1 at half time tells you everything you need to know. But that game was finished when it went. You could arguably say it was finished when it went to 2-1, but it was certainly finished at 3-1. And so, so what does pragmatism mean? You park 10 men behind the ball once it's too late. But you have to be a wee bit more resolute and rigid. And, and there's also an argument, you see, where you're talking about that number 6. They need a dominating presence in there. It's only with height and a bit of physicality, because they were brushed aside last night. They really were brushed aside.
I'll be honest, Tony, I thought that was going to be Engels. I thought that would be Engels. I thought that was the reason why they signed Engels, but he seems to be getting deployed as a number 10 rather than a number 6. Yeah. I know he can play in all 3 positions, but maybe I would like to see Celtic shuffling the pack. I know he didn't have a good game last night, but I would like to see him deployed in that position if he's got the know-how to play there, because I don't think that you can play McGregor in there in that number 6 role anymore, especially in Europe. You can do it domestically and he will run games, but that's because Celtic have got the majority of the ball. When the backs are against the wall and they're having to defend their box and defend from opposition attacks at a more frequent rate, then McGregor's better as a number 8 than a number 6. If you want that second line of defence after the back line, then you need somebody that's imposing and dominating in that. I'm not saying that Engels can be that player. I'm not saying that Engels won't be that player, because we don't know what he's like as a number 6, but he has played there for Augsburg in the Bundesliga. So maybe it's something for Celtic and Brendan Rodgers to try. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas.
Spitballing. I mean, you admire the fact that Celtic went there to take on Borussia Dortmund, who lost the final last year, try and go toe-to-toe with them. But you very quickly learned, playing like that, you adopted the same kind of tactics that you did against St Johnstone Saturday. They're not St Johnstone, they're Borussia Dortmund. So you have to do something a bit different, don't you? But I think that was a problem, that whilst it's admirable, that's what happens. Against St Johnstone, everything that Celtic touched seemed to go in the net. It was a role reversal last night, and Celtic were cast in the St Johnstone role. Borussia Dortmund, they sensed blood very early, and it's a wonderful arena, and the crowd got right behind them, and so that's fair enough. But you have to make yourself harder to beat. It's all right saying that, but you have to then do it. And I just thought Celtic last night were, I think you said it earlier, that they were architects of their own downfall. You put your player ratings up, Ryan, today. It makes for very grim reading. 3s, 4s. Not one player get past marks, I believe. Is that right?
I think the highest player was 5, and that was Kasper Schmeichel, and I could have easily gave him a 4 for some of his contributions. I gave Bailly a 4 because I thought he looked bright when he was playing, and he had a couple of nice moments going forward. But that was just it was almost like the game was over.
Yeah, he looked bright because the game's finished, and Dortmund just sort of went fine, and they made a raft of changes as well, didn't they? Took the likes of Adeyemi off. I know he was kind of injured at the time, but he took him away. The pity substitutes I think they were making by the end of it.
Yeah.
And
Hamish, how you doing?
Oh, smashing! I'm great, guys. Oh.
And I was asking at the time as well about the deflected goal with Schmeichel. I don't say he was at fault, but I only saw it once in real time and wasn't sure if he could have did more for that. But I mean, that's been overly critical, I guess. But I just from the moment Schmeichel brings the player down for the first penalty, you're up against it. I know we got back in it, but and I thought the response, and I'm thinking, great, what a response that is. But that's the only time of the night you felt okay. Let's kick on from that. They just didn't kick on from that.
You're in charge, Ryan.
Yeah, I know my internet is absolutely dreadful at the moment. It keeps on cutting in and out, so I'll try my best to keep the ship is steady. It'll probably be as steady as Celtic's defence was last night, to be honest with you. But Hamish, what's your overriding thoughts on the game? I mean, you probably had a couple of hours to sort of dissect it in your head. You've probably done your own video as well on it. So what's your thoughts on the way that game transpired? All that optimism that we had before the game seemed to evaporate within 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, probably less than that, yeah. The game didn't go at all how I thought it would, guys. Like, I thought we would have more of the ball than we did. I think I was looking at the stats, and I don't know if you brought this up or if anyone's had a look at the stats, but the stats are very even, like surprisingly even. I think the XG is like something like 2.6 for Borussia Dortmund, and somehow ours is 2.2 or something like that, which I found ridiculous, but I guess that either translate on. But generally, the game didn't play out how I thought it would. I was so excited about the front three and seeing Kuhn, Maida, Kyogo. Maida was all right, I thought. For me, probably our best player. That's not saying a lot, but Kuhn and Kyogo just weren't involved in the game at all. And even when Kuhn got that chance in the second half, there was no conviction. So it just was... it was a real off night for this team in terms of this season, but when you look at Brendan Rodgers' record in these real tough Champions League games, he's got a bit of a catalogue of really bad results now. 7-0, 7-1, 6-0, 2 7-1s actually, 5-0 to Paris Saint-Germain. So I'm guessing you guys have spoken about it, but it's more for me now what happens going into this Atalanta game, because that's a game that I'm fearing. If I'm honest, I think they've got some really good players as well. And Rodgers has said, we're never going to go out and just defend. He's made that point last night. So in a way, it's a bit of a pointless debate, people saying that. But also, there's not just two things you do. There's not just a tactic where you do what we did last night and a tactic where you do what we did against Barcelona in 2012. There's like degrees of what you do. And I think we can go out in Atalanta and still cause them more problems than we did last night. But I think there's things we can do to be more defensively resolute. I couldn't believe how open we were. 2.5 minutes into the game, guys, Bernardo gives the ball away. Dortmund are in. We get away with it. A minute later, one of the Dortmund players plays one pass through, and Dortmund have a 6-on-3. 3 minutes into the game, we get away with that as well. And then we have the I think it was Adeyemi incident for the penalty. So the tactics were way off, because the tactics were clearly to go out and go after Dortmund. The irony was that we didn't lay a glove on them. So we have to do something different. I know the manager, he knows more about this than me, and I respect the fact that he's going to go out and attack teams, because personally I feel that's how Celtic should play. But the tactics have to be different from last night, because if we play like we did last night with those tactics, we're going to suffer big defeat to Atalanta. We're going to suffer a big defeat to Aston Villa. And that's not to let the players off, by the way, because the players last night, not one of them, for me, got pass marks. I heard you talking about Schmeichel there. That was a worry for me, because I didn't see that coming. Kasper Schmeichel was at fault for at least 2 of the goals. So I know he made a few saves, but not a great night, Ryan.
No, not at all. No, and I thought his angles were all wrong for Adeyemi's second goal. He shouldn't allow... was it Adeyemi's second goal? I think it was his first goal. He's talking about 3 goals. The guy had the runaround, gave Celtic the runaround. It was almost as if it was a blessing when he got took off injured early on in the second half.
The long distance one.
Yeah, the angle, the amount of space that he's given to take that shot, or the amount of space that he gives him in the goal to aim for, is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous angle, and somehow he manages to. It's a great finish. Don't get me wrong. The power on it is incredible, but at the same time, he gives him every opportunity by the angle that he gives, and it's just really, really disappointing. That's Atalanta is the worry for me, because they're the Europa League winners. They are really, really effective under Gasperini. They're a good side. They've got Ademola Lookman, who tore a really brilliant Bayer Leverkusen team apart in the Europa League final. That was one of the performances of the ages, I would say, in terms of an attacking player. So that's what Celtic have got to look forward to, and then they've got Leipzig after that. So it's not as if the fixtures get any easier at the moment, but they've got to change something. I know they won't make wholesale changes in terms of the tactics, but maybe it's a psychological thing with the players. The players have got to not let the heads go down if they concede a couple of goals, because at 3-1, I mean, I don't know about you, Hamish, they looked absolutely defeated at 3-1. Yeah. I think everybody was defeated collectively. Everybody just accepted that Celtic were going to get beat when the third goal went in, not long after the second. And from then on, it was a long way back, and they conceded another 2 before half-time.
But Tony made the point earlier in the week about us shipping goals in
clusters.
Clusters, that's the word. And it happened again last night. It's happened under 3 managers in a row, 4 if you include Rodgers' first spell. It's a thing Celtic do in Europe, and can't quite put my finger on why that happens. I think when the team concede, I think they struggle to get a foothold back in the game, and the opposition are rampant, and we really struggle to get out. I've thought it for years about Celtic, that like when we're great, we're great, and we can play through teams, and we saw that against Slovan Bratislava and Rangers and all that. But when you have games like last night and a team pressing us and we're not confident, we really don't have like a player who can like get us out of a hole and get us up the pitch or something like that. The ball just keeps coming back at us. So that was an issue again last night, Tony.
It seems to be the Celtic way in Europe to lose clusters. I remember we lost a lot of goals to Astana. Remember?
Yeah.
We were 5-0 up. And then all of a sudden it became a problematic game because they lost like 3 in jig time, didn't they? Or 4 in jig time. And
they're Betis.
Yeah, correct.
Sheva away as well.
Sheva ended up being the skin of the teeth job, and you were 5-2 up from the first leg in that one. But you lost clusters of goals. So it's something over many years. It just doesn't seem to have been addressed. And we spoke about it earlier, Hamish. You can throw pragmatism, you can throw defensive football, park the bus, and all of these kind of things. It always seem to be said when you've suffered a particularly painful defeat. But there has to be some kind of way that Celtic can set up that, I know, I'm not saying go against your DNA, but, to give yourself every chance in a football match. They just didn't give themselves a chance. And as I say, we all 3 of us at 3-1, I'm thinking, okay, the game's done and dusted. I don't want Mullard. That's what you're thinking. This could be anything at that point. Yeah. Stop it from being the 7 it became. And I didn't see any kind of tactical tweaks from the manager at that point. I didn't see, I would have just immediately went 4-5-1.
The problem for me is that he made changes at half time, but it was 5-1. It was 3-1. You could have maybe stopped it. I know you could have those changes that would have stopped it from being 6-7-1. I said in one of the chats I was having with somebody, I said I'll take 7 just now, because that's the way it was getting. It looked like every time that Borussia Dortmund were coming forward that they were going to score, and it did turn out to be the case. Brendan Rodgers said that after the game. Every mistake that Celtic made was punished by the opposition. They were hungry for it and they wanted to put on a bit of a show. Yes, they've had a couple of adverse results against Stuttgart and the like, but they wanted to put on a show and they were hungry for it, and they were hungry for it in the second half, albeit they only scored 2 extra goals, but they still got those 2 goals to further compound the misery. I was asking Tony, Hamish, and we were speaking earlier on in the podcast about the need for a potential number 6, like a proper number 6 in there. Callum McGregor's great domestically in terms of his dominance on the ball. He's one of the best midfielders, if not the best midfielder in the domestic game. But do you think that Celtic need that more pragmatic? I know I've used that word about 20 times already in this podcast. Do they need that sort of destroyer just in front of the defence that's going to put out fires before it the likes of Trusty and Scales?
The issue you've got with that, and we've tried to sign that player a number of times in recent years. Eddie Gucci and Abelgard and James McCarthy, perhaps, and other guys. The issue you've got is that domestically, Callum McGregor is great in that position. Like, we've been raving about him. He's been brilliant this season at that level. So he's going to play domestically, and you wonder if you even need a player like that in the domestic games we have. And when it comes to European games, you're not going to take your captain out of the team. I know there could be an argument, do you have someone sitting deeper with McGregor in front, potentially? I don't know. Personally, that wouldn't be at the top of my list of the reasons why we didn't get a result yesterday. But I certainly would agree that the midfield was miles off it yesterday. You're talking about making subs potentially earlier than half time. I think Bernardo, I thought, had a real poor game in the first half. He could have come off after 25-30 minutes. Rodgers obviously decided not to do that, made the change at half time instead, maybe just trying to kind of save confidence and all that. And I totally get that. But I thought Bernardo really struggled. For me, it's like looking ahead now, what are our chances? And despite how bad last night was, I still think we can finish in the top 24. I think when it comes to Celtic Park, I think it is going to be different to last night. I don't think, hopefully this doesn't age horrendously, but I don't think you're going to see the kind of performance we saw last night in the games at Celtic Park. And we do still have matches we can win at Celtic Park, and we need 7 points, possibly 6, to make it through. So I still feel good about our chances there. But equally, like, I look at Atalanta and Aston Villa away, and I think those could be real tough nights unless we do something different. So it's a weird place to be at the moment, but I'm already looking at Club Brugge at Celtic Park. Won't be easy, but that's a game we have to win. Young boys, I think they get battered again last night, so you're looking at that as being a game you fancy. Obviously Zagreb away from home, and even Leipzig at home. I know some people might be writing Leipzig at home off as a defeat and all that. I think if we turn up and play like we did against Bratislava, we can get a draw in that game. So I still think there's loads to be gained for us despite last night.
I think we're in the position in the table. It's not position in the table, but I think we are where we thought we would be after 2 games.
Yeah.
I win and a loss. So I don't think anybody was under any illusion that way. So, and the thing is, we've got 6 games in the campaign. We can't afford to dwell on this, and for any kind of malaise to set in. It's a setback, granted. It's a huge one, because you just don't like seeing your team getting beat 7-1, but the manager said himself, he has to lift them again. So it's gone. Yep, the worry is that Atalanta are coming over the hill in the Champions League, but they've got time to do something about that. I think it's everything else. It's just the manner of that defeat, isn't it? That it's hard to take. It's painful because, let's be honest, we're the best will in the world, and we know they were a Champions League beating finalists and all that, and they're a great side. You just didn't see it coming, not with the way Celtic were playing. And that's what spooks me the most, that those players have that ability to fall off a cliff like that when at European level of football, when domestically they're imperious. And I know the level, it's just, there is no rhyme or reason to that for me. And it's the Jekyll and Hyde nature of the Celtic team that I thought they had shed. Clearly it's still there.
It's a strange thing, isn't it? Like, it's strange. I know there's a huge gulf between domestic football and the Champions League, but like, you've gone from like an incredible performance at the weekend to last night. like that was as bad a performance. Is it just that the players are spooked at that level? Because they should be able to. Maybe games like last night. Maybe it's fair to say we lose that. Fair enough, but they should be able to put up much better showing than what they did last night.
I remember there was something I was watching a few years back, and it's about when players go into a sort of blackout mode where they just concede goals, and the only other game that I can look back to is the 7-1 from Brazil when they got beat against Germany in the World Cup in 2014. It was almost exactly the same. It was one of those ones where the players just go into blackout mode. They can't defend anymore, and the team that are attacking them are just scoring at will. So they might have not even had anything to do with it, but they couldn't stop what Dortmund were doing last night for whatever reason. It's disappointing, but they can't, as Tony said, they can't allow them to dwell on it. And it's Ross County next on Sunday. It's a trip to Dingwall on Sunday afternoon. It's got to be 3 points. Just keep on going, keep on doing what they need to do domestically. But don't think about this one too much. Be annoyed about it today and tomorrow, by all means. But all focus has to be on Ross County now, doesn't it?
But it's not a free pass from what happened in the players' performance last night.
No, absolutely not.
That has to be addressed. You know, and say to players, it's unacceptable. It's not good enough. And even the manager himself, he says he likes to, self-assess his own performance. Could the manager have done better? Of course he could have. And the nature of football is the next game comes along. Of course, and so it's Ross County and Dingwall, and that's what I mean. You just have to get it out of your system and move on and get back on the domestic horse, and that's all they can do at this minute in time. But you have to try now. You've got between now and Bergamo to work on some kind of strategy that will make you play better and make yourself harder to beat in Italy against Atalanta.
It was just because the tactics were off, but there also was, as I say, we set out clear to go after them with our tactics.
Yeah.
But we didn't lay a glove on them. I can't remember one great tackle that we put in at all, and just the ease they were able to get through I was pretty surprised at that. But listen, it's it's 3 points after 2 games. We've still got an opportunity going forward, and the team need to work on it. I'm certainly not throwing in the towel to this team. Like they've been brilliant so far this season. Last night was our first big test. We failed spectacularly, but more tests will be to come. And there's an argument it's the games against Young Boys, Club Brugge, and Dinamo Zagreb that will determine whether we finish top 24 or not.
Yeah, without a doubt, and I think they can get 9 points from those games. I think they can win those 3 games. Those are winnable games, and this is the beauty of the new format, because you're coming up against teams like Young Boys and Club Brugge and Dinamo Zagreb away. So you do have an opportunity to pick up points more than what you would have expected if you were in a group stage. Imagine having to play Dortmund at home. You'd be dreading that. You'd be dreading playing Dortmund at home, even though it'd be a great spectacle and the Dortmund fans would come in their thousands. You'd be all of a sudden dreading it after last night's result. But the good thing is, I suppose, is the fact that you don't need to play Dortmund again. You don't need to play them twice. Yes, you're playing against a team that are maybe just as good, if not slightly better, in RB Leipzig. But that's at home. Celtic have beaten RB Leipzig at home before. We'll see if they can do that again. It's one of those ones that anything can happen, especially at Celtic Park. I think it's a factor, as you quite rightly said, Hamish. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about last night's game? I realise that we've gone on for 43 minutes. Tony's shaking his head. He wants away from here as soon as possible off this briefing. Hamish, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I think, just as you say, I think it'll be different at Celtic Park. If you look at the past couple of seasons, our good performances have all been at Celtic Park. So I think the matches at Celtic Park are the ones that will determine whether we finish top 24 or not. But that's not to let the team off last night. It was unacceptable, and I hate watching that. It's totally embarrassing watching your team ship 7 goals.
It was always going to be the case that the home games were going to be imperative.
Yeah.
We knew we were going to have to possibly try and be 100% in the home games. Nothing has swayed my opinion from that. And see if you can nick something on your travels. it wasn't to be last night in the most emphatic way. But you're in an 8-game section. It's not done after 2 games. It just feels like it a bit. I guess the nature of the drubbing. But it's come Friday, you'll be buoyed up and keyed up for Dingwall on Sunday. It just that lingering feeling. It was a shock. Let's put it this way: you get blindsided by that because you felt this team were capable of so much more. But it's a harsh lesson to learn again at the elite club level of football, and that's what happens.
When you swim with the big boys, this is sometimes what happens. Unfortunately, and Celtic have been stung more than one occasion by teams like Borussia Dortmund, like Barcelona, PSG, Atletico Madrid. Brendan Rodgers was quick to mention that last night, that it's the level of teams that are doing this to Celtic that could be a factor as well. You play against elite players, this is what happens. Thank you very much to everybody that's commented. It's been such a busy show this morning. I knew that was going to be the case, but thank you to everybody for joining us. If you want to support us just that little bit more, you can join our YouTube members channel, just £2.99 a month, and you'll receive early video access, priority comments, and exclusive members chat function. Click that join button next to the subscribe button and get involved if you're on the desktop. Thank you very much, Hamish, for joining us. Thank you, Tony, as always, for coming on, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers, guys.